Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. So we finished our Shachrit service. We finished Hallel. This is the moment, of course, when we would be taking out the Torah and getting ready for our Torah reading, which we, again, are not going to do this morning, although on the seventh day of Pesach, I'm still remembering how we were able to have Jeff Darby read the seventh Aliyah, the Shirat Hayam, I should say, and we may play around and see if we can figure out a way to do that again if we eventually move these services to a Zoom service. For now, it's helpful for me to have the distinction between the Zoom, which has become very much a weekday thing, and this service, which we do by live stream, to sort of preserve a little sense of Shabbat. But we are in unprecedented times, so we'll see how things unfold. So the things I want to share with you this morning, first of all, I want to come back to the day of the Omer. This is Givurah of Tiferet. It is Tiferet we talked about as that blend between loving kindness and discipline. That happens when we add that element of truth, of seeing things from a slightly detached place, from a more objective place. And I'm going to read today what we mean when we say Givurah of Tiferet, which is described as discipline in compassion. Discipline in compassion. For compassion to be effective and healthy, it needs to be disciplined and focused. It requires discretion, both to whom you express compassion and in the measure of the compassion itself. It is recognizing when compassion should be expressed and when it should be withheld or limited. Discipline and compassion is knowing that being truly compassionate sometimes requires withholding compassion, because compassion is not an expression of the bestower's needs, but a response to the recipient's needs. I'm going to read that last part again. Compassion is not an expression of the bestower's needs. It's not something that I need if I'm bestowing compassion upon you, but it should be a response to the recipient's needs. And we have to know when, in giving compassion, we may be enabling and not helping a person, and when, in bestowing compassion, we are truly helping. Some questions for us to think about, a number of questions today. Am I more compassionate with strangers than with close ones? If yes, why is that the case? Is the compassion coming from guilt? Does my compassion for others compromise my own needs? Am I helping others at the expense of helping myself? Perhaps the contrary is the case. Does my compassion for my family and close ones overshadow others' needs? So how do we find that right balance between helping those who are closest to us and also helping others? Is my compassion impulsive and careless? Do I assess the measure of compassion necessary for a given situation? Is it commensurate with the recipient's needs? Can I possibly be hurting that person with my compassion? Does my compassion overwhelm others? Or is it respectful to what others need? Do I give too much or too little? Do others take advantage of my compassion and of my compassionate nature? When I see a needy person, do I impetuously express compassion out of guilt or pity without any discretion? Do I commit the crime of compassion by helping a person with something harmful? Do I apply myself to determine this person's needs and to help that person in the best way possible? So the idea, this is a very important idea, that there's a discipline that has to find its way in compassion. And we think of compassion as something that should just express itself and as an ultimate good. But I think part of what this is saying is that even this is not an ultimate good. It's a beautiful quality, but it too needs a measure of focus, a measure of figuring out what that person's need, when a person may need it, and also what do I need, and what am I capable of. So an exercise for us to think about. Express your compassion today in a focused and constructive manner by addressing someone's specific needs. And I would add to this, and taking into account your own specific needs as well. So that's our thought about the 16th day of the Omer, Givurah of Tiferet, discipline in compassion. Our Torah portion this morning, it's actually two Torah portions this morning, Tazria Mitzorah, two Torah portions that I will say that for Torah readers, perhaps there is a bit of relief. A bit of relief, or maybe we are experiencing a bit of God's compassion in having these two Torah portions off. They are not easy Hebrew to read, and the subject matters can be tricky as well. These are Torah portions that speak to illnesses, and it's certainly a time when we are thinking about a lot about illness and a lot about how we treat illness in our society. There are descriptions here of quarantine, the special role that the Kohen, the priest, would play, really serving as a physician, but the illnesses that are expressed here have a physical element to them, and yet the rabbis were never satisfied in saying that they only had a physical component. So I want to focus today on the particular illness that is the topic. It's actually in both Torah portions, but it's the name of the second Torah portion, Mitzorah. It's been mistranslated as leprosy. This was not leprosy, and we don't know quite what it is. And before I go into this line of thinking, I want to say one caution, which is the rabbis looked for what were the spiritual causes of physical illness, or the ethical or moral causes of spiritual illness. And I want to say that this can be a very dangerous line of thinking. We should not interpret when we ourselves are sick, or when someone we love or someone we know is sick, that is some sort of punishment from God. I reject that theology. I especially reject that theology when it is employed by one person and foisted upon another person, as if any individual understands perfectly the mind of God and knows why it is that things that are bad happen in this world. That to me is an abuse, not a use of religion. You have heard me say in other contexts that when you take on a faith, a belief in God, the very next corollary of that should be, yes, there is a God and I am not. And therefore, I am ultimately humble and acknowledge that there is a tremendous amount that I don't know. And I especially don't know why it is that people suffer from illness. With that, and that's a very, very important caveat, and we shouldn't assume for ourselves because that can be debilitating. It can be stigmatizing. I was speaking with a colleague in New York who was telling me how there are many members of his congregation who have had coronavirus but don't want to speak about it because of the stigma and because they feel that people everybody, when you first hear about an illness, you want to say, well, what caused that to happen? Because when we can assign a reason to something, then it makes us feel better, because illness ultimately reminds us that our lives are out of our control. And the process of assigning a reason to something can be extremely painful and stigmatizing to people. And so rather than stigmatize and rather than say this is why it happened and therefore it's your fault, and making ourselves feel better because we can say, well, I didn't do that. Part of what we have to learn is an ability to be present with illness, and in being present with illness, being present with uncertainty and inhabiting our anxiety, and just understanding that this is hard. It's difficult, doesn't excuse us from doing things which we should do to protect ourselves, but there is a measure of this which is out of our control. The rabbis sought out explanations for why these illnesses occurred, and in doing so, what I want to offer us by studying them and talking with you about them, I don't mean to suggest that we stigmatize, et cetera, but there is an important move that we can make when confronting suffering and when confronting illness, which is, rather than saying, why did this happen to me, why me, we can say productively, what can I learn from this? How can I emerge from this experience as a better person, as a more compassionate person, as a more moral person? And that, I think, is a fruitful exercise for us to go through. Not for us to go through and tell other people, but for us to explore for ourselves. And the rabbis demonstrated tremendous creativity, as you can imagine, with regard to this Torah portion, and specifically the illness called Tzarat. So I want to go over two teachings about Tzarat. One is from the Kli Yakar, my favorite commentator who I'm continuing to study each week. And he says that what he points out is that there are three main sins that the rabbis associated with causing Tzarat. He says very creatively, Tzarat often has there are skin ailments, and what it is it's the it comes from Tzarat is motzi ra, which motzi from the word hamotzi. God brings out bread from the earth. This to bring out, and ra is something evil. And so the eruption, he says, is the bringing out something bad from the biology of the time. I think he thought was there's something that's harmful inside, and that the body it's coming out and expressing itself with either a boil or a miscoloration or a rash or whatever on the skin. And the rabbis associated three sins with this. One of them was Motzi Shem Ra, was sort of evil speech. It was talking negatively about people. The second one that they associated was arrogance, and the reason for that is that if you read in the Torah portion, once a person is purified, they bring an offering, and the offering that they bring is made from hyssop, zatar, and hyssop grows close to the ground. And so the rabbis said that that person humbles themselves by going close to the ground and getting the hyssop for the offering, and that process of bringing yourself close to the ground was a cure for the sin of arrogance. And then they also had this sense that it came from tsarut ayin, right? Again, that root, tsarut ayin, tsar and tzadi resh ayin. And tsarut ayin is stinginess, is sort of being miserly. And we're going to talk about that more in a few minutes. But what they said is that the Kohanim, that Aaron and his family were perfectly suited to help people who were struggling with these moral problems, with these ethical and character flaws, because they did not possess these things. So, as an example, he says, when you speak lashon hara, when you speak negatively about people, you cause arguments between people. And Aaron was known as Ohev Shalom v'Rodef Shalom, Ohevet B'riyot u'Mikrovan LaTorah. He was known as a one who loved peace and pursued peace. And there's stories about how he was the fixer in the family. He would go and reconcile people. If two people had a fight, he would go to one and say, your loved one is feeling so badly about this. It's not clear, by the way, that loved one was feeling that way, but he would tell him so anyways, right? Sometimes he put love and reconciliation, shalom, the attribute of peace, above truth. And then he would go to the other person and he would say, your loved one is feeling so bad, and he would bring the two of them back together, right? So Aaron was a seeker of truth, which was helpful for people who had been speaking lashon hara. Kliakar says Aaron and Moses both say in a passage that we're actually studying on Wednesday mornings, when the people complain about not having food, Aaron and Moses turn to them and say, "V'nachnu ma." Who are we, right, that you're complaining against us? Meaning, say, we're nothing. So Aaron and Moses possessed a sense of great humility, so he could help people with that sense of arrogance. And he also points out, the Kliakar points out, that the Kohanim actually had no inheritance in the land of Israel. And because they had no inheritance, they weren't burdened by the stinginess of the material world. And so they could be very generous because they didn't really have any possessions to begin with. So what I want to just point out about this line of thinking is that, and this is probably a more current events learning from this, but the Kliakar is saying the model here is that you actually need to have healthy people, that the Kohanim are healthy people, and with their health, they are able to help to cure others of their illnesses. So the model here is you have to have a segment of people in the society who are not struggling with these things, who can then help people who are. And of course, I'm thinking of all of those people who are on the front lines, our healthcare workers, and what's so critical about this crisis is that in not overwhelming, by practicing social distancing and we are not overwhelming our healthcare system, and we're making it, hopefully, we are preserving the possibility of health for our healthcare, for anyone involved in healthcare, working, in healthcare, and how important it is that there are PPEs, that there is personal protective equipment for our healthcare workers and for all of those people who are in our grocery stores, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the Kliakar. The second piece comes to me from Jerusalem, from Donnie Segel, who is one of our teachers at the Hartman Institute. Got news this week that I will not be going to the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem this summer. I will miss that experience very much. But the Torah continues to come from Tzion, ki tzitzion mitzion tete Torah. The second teaching that Donnie points out about Mitzorah is the Mitzorah occurs in three places. Number one, on the skin. Number two, on people's clothing. And number three, in people's houses. And what Donnie points out is that each of these three places where Mitzorah occurs are the place, the membrane between the inside and the outside, between us and the world. And so skin and the clothing form the barriers between our bodies and the world. And the walls of our houses form the barrier between the inside of our homes and the outside of our homes. And he goes back to these sins that the rabbis associated with Mitzorah and says that, Lashon Hara is one aspect of Lashon Hara is that when we speak Lashon Hara, when we say something negative about other people, or we listen to negative things about other people, what's happening is the filter that we should have for either what comes out of our mouths or what comes in to our hearts is not working the way that it should. There's too much negativity being spoken out into the world, or our ears are too open to negativity. If we are hearing somebody speak negatively about someone else, the ideal, and this is a very, very difficult ideal, I do not live up to it the way that I should, but the ideal in the Jewish tradition is that you speak up and you stop a person from speaking negatively about someone else. Second would be at least you walk away. If you can't stop it, at least you're not present for it. And if for other reasons you can't do either of those things and you have to hear it, the idea is that you should have a filter, right? Even though your ear is literally hearing it and maybe taking it in your mind, you should try to be filtering that so that it doesn't affect your heart and doesn't affect what you think about another person. But there's something broken in the filter that is existing between you and the world when we speak Lashon Hara. And then he tells a beautiful story about stinginess, right? That's Tzarut Ayin. The Midrash tells a story that what happens when somebody gets Mitzorah on their house is that somebody goes up to you and knocks on your door and says, hey buddy, can I borrow a hammer? Or could I borrow this, or could I borrow that? And the person who suffers from this stinginess always says no. Nope, can't use it. I don't have it, right? Maybe even lies, right? And says, I don't have this. And what happens is when you get Tzarat on the house, you have to empty out the whole house. And what happens, according to the Midrash, is all the neighbors come along and they say, I thought you said you didn't have a hammer. Look, right there, right? You have a hammer. And you were lying to us. Or look at how many things you have, and look at how stingy you were. And so the Tzarat is the cure, right, for this stinginess, because people see the way in which you were not giving of your homes. And again, to come back to this barrier, the idea is that the walls of our homes should not just protect us. They're meant to breathe. We're supposed to have doors. We're supposed to have windows. And beyond the physical, we have homes so that we can practice Hachnasat Orchim. So we can practice welcoming people into our homes and having our homes be a place of nourishment. And actually, Donnie brought one more beautiful teaching. The language of the Torah around Tzarat is when you come into the land of Israel, God says, "V'natati Tzarat," right? I am not if you get Tzarat, but I, God, am going to put Tzarat on your homes. And it doesn't sound like, it's like, why is God going to do this? And the commentators point out that the word natati, right, is actually related to matana, a gift, right? I'm going to give you tzarat. And how can that be a gift? And the truth is that it can be a gift. One of the commentators says that, it's going to be a gift because when the Canaanites were in their homes and they heard that the Israelites were coming, they would hide all of their valuables in their homes. And then when we conquered the land, and we got Tzarat, we would find all these nice gifts. I don't think that interpretation is as important for us as this idea that when we get Tzarat, what happens is we take down the walls of our homes. We take down the walls of our homes, and that there's a blessing. It's such an important thing for us. It's a blessing to take down the walls of our homes. And we, right now we're in quarantine, and we are tightening up the walls of our homes. We're wiping things down if they've come into our homes. We're being very careful about distancing, et cetera, and it's true that we need to do this, but it's such a reminder that the true health, the true way that we should live in our lives is by being generous and welcoming people into our homes and having our homes breathe and having our lives breathe in a way that is a blessing to God, that will be a blessing to us, and that is a blessing to the world. So my blessing for us this Shabbos, as we think about quarantining and we think about illness, is that we should have the blessing of good filters for Lashon Hara, not speaking negatively about other people, and not listening to the negativity that other people put into the world, and filtering out all of the nonsense, and for our homes, that we always remember the importance and the gift, the real gift that we are being given when the walls of our homes break down and we are more at one with those who are in our community and in the world. Shabbat Shalom.